There are moments in film history that change everything, not just for a studio, not just for a franchise, but for the entire industry. Iron Man was one of those moments. A movie that was never supposed to succeed, led by an actor Hollywood had given up on, created by a studio that had everything to lose. No one saw it coming. No one understood what was about to happen. And yet, when that first suit of armor came to life, something shifted. Something bigger than just another superhero film. The world did not know it at the time, but they were witnessing the birth of a new era. An era where superhero movies would no longer be side projects, where interconnected storytelling would become the future, and where one single character would define an entire generation of filmgoers. It all started with one man. One genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, who took the idea of a hero and turned it into something new. A character who did not need superpowers to be legendary. A character who was flawed, arrogant, and sometimes downright reckless, but who still became the face of an empire. That is why Iron Man still stands tall, even after all these years. It was not just the first movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it was the foundation. The reason people believed in Marvel's vision, and the reason Tony Stark's journey became the single most important story in all of modern superhero cinema. But how did it all happen? How did a film that was never supposed to work end up shaping the future of Hollywood? How did a single character become the most beloved hero of an entire generation? And what made Iron Man, against all odds, the start to a truly great franchise? In this video, we are going to break it all down. The risks that Marvel took, the character that redefined what it meant to be a superhero, the story that proved itself by focusing on what truly mattered, the impact that shaped a universe, and the legacy that still shines brighter than ever. This is Iron Man, the start to a great franchise. Iron Man was not just another superhero film. It was a gamble that could have destroyed Marvel before it even had a chance to thrive. When the studio decided to make a movie based on a character that mainstream audiences barely knew, people thought they had lost their minds. To say expectations were low would be putting it lightly. Then came Robert Downey Jr. The man who Hollywood had all but abandoned was chosen to lead the most important movie in Marvel's history. It was a controversial decision. The studio heads were hesitant, the investors were terrified, and the audience had no idea what to expect. But Downey did something that no one else could. He made Tony Stark more than just a billionaire in a metal suit. He made him real. The magic was not in the technology or the action scenes. It was in the character. Tony was arrogant but charming, broken but brilliant, reckless but undeniably human. He was not the perfect hero that audiences were used to. He was selfish, careless, and completely full of himself. But that is exactly why people connected with him. He was a hero that felt flawed, and flaws are what make characters feel alive. When Iron Man hit theaters, the world saw something it was not expecting. A superhero movie that was not just about fighting villains, but about transformation. It was not just about Tony building a suit. It was about him becoming a different man. That was the moment that changed everything for Marvel. That was when people started to realize this was the beginning of something much bigger. Before Iron Man, most superheroes fit into neat little boxes. But Tony Stark shattered those expectations. He was not a tortured soul like Batman, and he was not the symbol of righteousness like Superman. He was something completely different. A man who thrived on ego, who made mistakes, and who never apologized for being himself. That kind of character was rare in superhero films, and yet, it worked. It worked because Tony's growth was not just about becoming a better person. It was about learning what it meant to truly be a hero. He did not get powers from some cosmic accident. He built his own legend, with nothing but his mind and his will to survive. That made him different from every other hero that came before him. It made him feel earned, like he actually had to fight for his place in the world. That is why audiences connected with him. He was not perfect. He was not invincible. He was a man who made selfish choices, but when it really mattered, he did the right thing. That kind of complexity made him fascinating to watch. Every decision he made carried weight, because you never knew if he was going to let his worst instincts win. And that is why Iron Man still stands out even after all these years. He was not just a hero, he was a person. A person who had to learn, had to struggle, and had to prove that he was worthy of the legacy he would go on to build. Iron Man was not just a fun superhero film. It was a story that understood the weight of its own narrative. It did not waste time trying to set up a massive universe. It focused on telling one great story, and that is exactly why it worked. The movie did not assume the audience cared about Iron Man from the start. It gave them a reason to care by making them watch Tony Stark's journey unfold in a way that felt natural. It was a film that respected its own pacing. It let moments breathe. It allowed tension to build. It made sure that when Tony finally put on the suit, it felt like a moment that had been earned. That kind of storytelling is rare in modern superhero films. Too often, movies rush through the journey just to get to the spectacle. But Iron Man never made that mistake. Every scene had purpose. Every choice had meaning. From the moment Tony was captured in the desert to the moment he declared that he was Iron Man, everything led to something bigger. The film did not need a massive villain with world-ending stakes. It just needed a character that people could believe in, and it made sure that Tony's choices mattered more than the size of the explosions. That is what made Iron Man special. It was not just about making a cool superhero film. It was about crafting a story that felt like it had weight, like it mattered. And that is something that so many films today seem to forget. Iron Man did not have the biggest budget. It did not have the most complex visual effects, but what it had was something far more valuable. It had focus. Instead of relying on CGI overload, the film used practical effects whenever it could. The first Iron Man suit was not just created in a computer, it was built, it was worn. It looked real because it was real, and that made a massive difference. The action scenes were not just mindless destruction, they were carefully crafted moments that made Tony's abilities feel grounded. When he tested his suit for the first time, it was not just a cool moment, it was a reminder that this man was actually building his own power from the ground up. That kind of storytelling makes every victory feel personal, and the best part was, the film did not overcomplicate itself. It did not waste time with unnecessary subplots. It did not try to do too much. It knew exactly what it was. A character-driven story with just the right amount of spectacle. That level of restraint is rare in superhero films today. Iron Man proved that simplicity is often the key to greatness. A film does not need to be overloaded with endless plot lines and forced setups to be memorable. It just needs to understand what makes its story worth telling. And Iron Man understood that better than most. No one could have predicted what Iron Man would become. At the time, it was just another superhero film. But what it started was something far bigger than anyone imagined. This was the film that built the foundation for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it all started with a single post-credit scene, just one line. Just one moment that hinted at something much bigger. Nick Fury stepping out of the shadows was not just a tease. It was a declaration, a statement that Marvel was about to change everything. And yet, it could have failed. If Iron Man had flopped, there would be no MCU, no Avengers, no Infinity War or Endgame. The risk was massive, but the reward changed the landscape of Hollywood forever. The success of Iron Man was not just about box office numbers. It was about proving that audiences were ready for something bigger, that people wanted interconnected stories, that a cinematic universe could actually work. And it all started with a single movie that dared to believe in itself. Iron Man was not just a movie, it was the match that lit the fire. The moment that turned Marvel from a struggling studio into a global phenomenon. And that kind of impact is something that very few films in history can claim. Iron Man was more than just the beginning of a franchise. It was the heart of an era. The film that made superheroes feel human. Without it, none of what followed would have existed. No other hero had the same presence. No other story had the same weight. And no other ending hit as hard as Tony Stark's final moment in Endgame. It is rare to see a character arc come full circle in such a satisfying way. The man who started as a selfish billionaire ended as the ultimate hero. The one who sacrificed everything for the universe he once ignored. That kind of storytelling is why Iron Man remains the gold standard of superhero films. Because it was never just about the action. It was about the journey. Even now, after all these years, Iron Man's impact has not faded. His legacy is still felt in every Marvel film that follows. But none have quite captured the same magic. None have managed to replicate the sheer brilliance of that first movie. Because Iron Man was not just a great film, it was the start of something legendary. A moment in cinema history that may never be repeated.